Manny, we should say, or I should say personally, that the future for Democrats in the state of Florida, frankly, does not look very bright.
We've raised more money this year than in any previous off year. We have built an organization already bigger than any organization we've had before in an off year, and we're ramping up.
Okay, so folks, we are here for another episode of Why Are We Like This, where we try to dissect the recurrent question, why is Florida like this? And that question is especially relevant after the royal ass kicking that the Florida Democrats got in the 2022 midterm elections, an election that was expected to see a so-called red wave of Republican victories across the country, but it looked more like a red tide or whatever you want to call it. It just didn't really manifest itself across the country except here in Florida. So Florida once again disappoints, bucks the trend, and it's just a complete wash for Democrats. We saw Ron DeSantis get reelected by 18 points. Marco Rubio defeated Val Demings by a similar margin. The Democrats performed so badly that they lost a state house seat in Miami Beach. So I think that will register with most people that listen to this. But if you don't know, Miami Beach is one of the most bluest Democratic areas of Miami-Dade County. So just complete failure, an apocalyptic night for Democrats in the Sunshine State. And that leaves us with a lot of questions. And again, the main question that we have here is, why are we like this? And to examine that, we have, as always, my co-host, David Quinones. How are you, David? How's everything?
Hey, T. Doing as good as we can do, I suppose.
Yeah, brimming with energy. And Gerald, how are you?
I am doing very well. Very, very well. High energy.
Yeah, Gerald.
You're full of shit, Gerald. No, you're not.
I know. My energy is sponsored today by Java Monster Energy Shakes.
And for people that don't know, Gerald's coming at us from New York, I believe you're from Patrick Maloney's district, who had a pretty good night as DCCC chair. A
night to remember.
A night to remember, but personally not the greatest night, as he has been unseated personally from his congressional perch. So wow, what a contradiction there. But we're also joined by Kartik Krishnaiyer, who is a former Democratic operative, a proud Floridian, as says so in his bio, and also the publisher of the Florida Squeeze, which is one of my favorite publications dealing with Florida politics. Also produces and records a bunch of different podcasts dealing with, again, Florida politics and Florida history that are like really, really interesting. So I do encourage people to check out the Florida Squeeze. Again, it's like a treasure trove of knowledge around the Sunshine State. But Kartik, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And it's a contradictory day, right? Because we feel like we've done well on the national level, but just in Florida, what a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing I want to say, T, really quick, I'm getting like a little bit of like a dispatch from some friends out in Las Vegas. It's germane to this topic that we're talking about. And what I'm getting is from a friend who's sort of aligned with the left wing of the state Democratic Party in Nevada, and apparently the Catherine Cortez Masto loss that a lot of people are kind of predicting, it's looking less and less like that's going to happen. Apparently there's just enough of those hidden, secret, waiting to be counted Nevada ballots that it's I'm not going to say that Adam Laxalt doesn't have it wrapped up, but it's looking like he might not have it wrapped up, which, if Raphael Warnock went to a runoff and won, as many think he would, that would be a net 1 seat gain for Democrats. in
My
the
goodness.
Senate,
Maybe
which is
there's enough.
insane to think of and probably also not going to happen. Just wanted to throw it out there before we get started, because that shows like how fresh we are into this whole this like these results that are still being counted.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the Harry Reid machine in Clark County is still there's still semblances of it, right? So maybe there is enough that they squeeze just enough votes out for her, and for Sisolak maybe too,
Yeah.
on the last day, because Nevada has some interesting rules we know about mail-in ballots. So I know there were organizers on the ground there even at 6 o'clock local time getting mail-in ballots sent back. So fingers crossed. I hope that's really good news.
Yeah, let's refocus on Florida, because great for the rest of the country that they that this GOP wave turned out to be like more of a trickle, but here in Florida that didn't pan out. Sure.
So we were talking earlier, like, 2016 Clinton wins Miami-Dade County by almost 30 points. DeSantis now looks like an 11-point victory in Miami-Dade, a 41-point swing. Obviously, that obscures voter turnout election per election. But David, to your point, like we were talking earlier, there does seem to be an absolute, like a set shift in Miami-Dade County specifically, which is if you're the Democratic Party and you don't have Miami-Dade, you don't have a path to victory in statewide elections. Can you talk about some of the concrete things that we've seen on the ground over the last, I'd say, 5 years that would contribute to that shift?
Yeah. So even more alarming, Miami-Dade we knew was going to be a problem, right? And we've known that since really the summer of 2020. The 15-point swing we saw in Miami-Dade, or 17 or 18-point swing we saw in Miami-Dade yesterday, was abnormal in 2020. It was not abnormal in 2022. So Osceola County, which is heavily Hispanic, similar swing. Broward, believe it or not, I mean, think about this. Broward County had a 15-point swing towards DeSantis yesterday. Orange County had a big swing towards DeSantis. Duval had a double-digit swing towards DeSantis from where we were in 2020. And same thing with Hillsborough and Pinellas. So basically, we saw it in every urban county. Oh, and Palm Beach. I mean, who could imagine losing Palm Beach County? And Tomas mentioned the state house seat that Jordan Leonard appears to have lost on Miami Beach. We had Andy Thompson, a city commissioner in Boca, who was going to walk into a heavily Democratic district, who lost last night to a nominal candidate the GOP fielded in that race. And that particular district has not been held by a Republican, I think, since the 1970s. So we're down to 35 seats in the state house, and we're down to 12 in the state senates. Yeah, it's really alarming, because if you've lost Miami-Dade County, you need to offset those votes in other places. And what instead seems to have happened is the trend that began in Miami-Dade County has been followed in the places like Duval and Hillsborough in particular, where we thought, okay, if we've actually lost Miami-Dade County and Latino voters have been radicalized there for whatever reason, Spanish language radio, you can name the reason, there are ways to offset that loss if you go into other urban counties, other big voter banks where similar demographic areas in other states are voting 65-70% for Democrats. So why is Hillsborough County only 52, Duval only 52? Maybe you can even squeeze more votes out of Broward and Palm Beach. That was the thinking going into the cycle. Well, guess what? Every single one of those counties now followed Miami-Dade with this huge swing in the other direction. And I think I was fearful about Broward, honestly. I on the ground in Broward, and was seeing sort of the bleed, right? The Miami-Dade and Broward obviously are next to each other. They're in the same media market. There's a lot of similar demographics, particularly in Southwest Broward. And it seems like what began in Miami-Dade really in 2018 has intensified now and spread to Broward in 2022. Palm Beach, I need to get some intelligence on what happened there, because honestly, Palm Beach was the one county 3 weeks ago, as when vote by mail began, that I felt really good about in the state. I knew we had a turnout issue in Broward. I knew Miami-Dade was probably gone, and we needed to cut the losses there. Felt like Hillsborough, Duval were not performing. In Orange, we had a turnout problem. But Palm Beach, right away, the VBM return rate was really high for Democrats. A lot of our traditional activists in that county were fired up. And then election day, there was this wave of GOP turnout. So it's really difficult to explain why we're seeing, as the state becomes more diverse, as the state becomes more urbanized, the state is becoming more Republican. That is actually the opposite of what is happening in the other 49 states of the union. So the less white a place, the less white the state is, the more Republican it's becoming. The more urbanized and more professional people you're bringing to the state, the less Democratic it is. Although, part of it is the kind of jobs we're attracting. The kind of jobs we've created here and the kind of jobs we're attracting are not the same sort of jobs you have in Georgia and North Carolina that are attracting good young professional people who will be liberal or progressive activists and be on the right side of politics from our perspective. So all of those are problems, but still, what happened yesterday, I'm just absolutely flabbergasted by the margins.
Yeah, Kartik, I guess this is going to be a really broad question, but and we can dissect it, right? Like, we'll start with a really bird's eye view of it all, and we'll try to get into the micro level as this conversation develops. But what do you think that happened within the Florida Democrats to lead us to this sorry state?
Yeah, I think it's been
like what's wrong with us?
Yeah, it's been a multi-year process, right? I think there was absolute denial of the fact among Florida Democrats that you needed to be aggressive in registering voters, that you needed to be aggressive in contacting people moving into the state. Was now Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma, so 2017. So right after we had a big influx of Puerto Ricans to the state from Hurricane Maria, exactly 5 years ago, there was an effort to get them activated, and that effort was then dropped in the middle. Basically, there was all sorts of hullabaloo early on. Okay, we've got all these new voters that are probably going to lean Democratic. Let's engage them, and then the engagement suddenly stopped. At the same time, you had lots of new residents moving to the state who were coming from the Midwest or from the Northeast, mostly the Midwest, they may have been Republicans or mostly NPAs, but Republican-leaning NPAs who came from states where the Republican Party was a lot less radical, right? And if you contact them, if you're nurturing them, if you're doing things in your community with them, you can get them to vote Democratic or to support Democratic candidates. Tomas, you and I have talked about this privately. Anna Escamani has done that in her district in Orange County, where there are a lot of people who you wouldn't expect to be supporting a progressive like Anna that support her because of the outreach, the constituent service, the hands-on relationship she's developed with her constituents. You have a lot of Democratic elected officials in this state that win low turnout Democratic primaries, and then they don't talk to their constituents again. And so that then reflects a party that has made no effort to reach out to new residents, new voters, has made no effort to reform its own party rules to where it's in compliance with the DNC and where DECs actually have an active function in the community. And I guess last night, yesterday, was always inevitable. It was always going to happen at some point. The bottom was going to fall out. It just happened to happen on a day where the Democrats performed very differently in other parts of the country. And I'll close on this note, on this point. Republican turnout wasn't any higher in Florida than it was in Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman won, in Wisconsin, where Tony Evers was reelected, and Mandela Barnes came within, a couple of 10,000 votes, 20,000 votes of winning, of unseating Ron Johnson. Republican turnout wasn't, Ron DeSantis didn't turn out tons of voters that Ron Johnson and Mehmet Oz didn't turn out. What happened is the Democrats here didn't turn out at all. So this is a Florida Democratic problem. This isn't, oh, Republicans are much stronger in Florida. And you look at the composition of the electorate yesterday, 45% of the electorate were Republicans when they are 36% of registered voters in Florida. So that alone means you're going to lose.
This is a money issue too, right, T? Like, this is about money. We share a friend. I think maybe all four of us. I don't know. We share a friend on Facebook, William, who made a post where he said that, and I don't know if he was just being capricious or if this is accurate, but he said that 98% of spending for like on the ground, grassroots activism from the National Party have been cut over the last 4 years. And I don't know if that's true. Tomas, you're probably better equipped to answer that than me. But this seems like a money issue. And Kartik, I bring it up because I saw one of your posts of it was funny. I was thinking about how I feel like I haven't heard that much about Val Demings in the national discourse. And then I saw where you retweeted that she brought in $72 million for that campaign to get washed, to get fucking washed. And I don't know.
I think I got like 89 texts a week from that campaign asking if I could contribute.
So did I. And the thing that's really unbelievable is that she didn't have any ground game. She didn't have any outreach. Peter Schorsch had tweeted this morning that as the publisher of Florida politics, regardless of what you think of Peter, if you're running for office in this state, you're going to need to have some sort of relationship with him. He never heard from her campaign. He probably heard from the candidate running in the Democratic or Republican primary in some small state House seat in Volusia County, but didn't hear from the U.S. Senate nominee with $72 million for the Democrats. And we just mentioned Mandela Barnes. We can talk about Tim Ryan, talk even about our candidate in North Carolina, Sherry Beasley. Can you imagine if some of that money had gone there? Yeah. And this is exactly why national donors have soured on Florida, because they look at the opportunity cost of having wasted so much money in this state on an inept Democratic Party and thought, my goodness, we could have flipped 4 or 6 governorships if we, put money in states like Kansas where the population's low, your dollars go further, and
media markets are cheaper. Media markets are cheaper, and they're only in one language.
Yeah, and smaller media markets, right? Florida has 5 top 50 media markets, right? And in a couple of those, you have to advertise in both languages. Right. So certainly in Orlando and the Miami Fort Lauderdale market, you have to do both languages. Maybe the West Palm market too, actually. So
in some you have to do 3, Kartik, because in Miami-Dade and in Palm Beach you got to do Creole as well.
Yeah, if you're not doing if you're not advertising Creole north of the 836 in Miami-Dade County, you're missing wide swaths of people.
Yeah,
but you know who did it this cycle? The DeSantis campaign actually spent thousands and thousands of dollars in Creole media, in Haitian media. Scary.
Yeah, and also in Palm Beach County, that's become a problem because I mentioned Palm Beach had the same sort of swing as Dade and shocked everybody. What I understand is a lot of that was Haitian American voters, including the state house district I mentioned, that the Haitian American voters were contacted by DeSantis' campaign. I'm sure this might explain Broward too, because as we know, Haitian Americans are, I don't know that there are many Haitians in the rest of the state, but in these 3 counties, particularly Miami-Dade, but also Broward and Palm Beach have a lot. They swung hard to the right this time. And that cost us a state house seat in Palm Beach County and probably cost us an opportunity at one in Miami-Dade.
And to your point, like, there in past years, it was a constant salve for members of the Democratic Party in the state of Florida that oh man, we have such an advantage in registered voters. If we just get our own members to the polls, if we just get a turnout machine, we outnumber them by. And they've closed the gap to the tune of 300,000. I think they probably lead by a few, maybe 100,000 at this point.
They're actually a couple 100,000 ahead now, but still,
better.
But still, if we turn out all our people, we will win because, again, Republican turnout wasn't any higher than it was in Pennsylvania or in Nevada, right? We opened with Nevada. The Republican turnout was decent there, and that's all it was in Florida. But we have no turnout mechanism. Look, I don't even know how they're coding data in the van anymore because I know Tomas introduced me as a retired politico, but I got brought out a retirement by the FDP 2 months ago to deal with some of our voter protection issues in Broward and Palm Beach counties. And I have to tell you, like, the data is all over the place. It's being coded wrong. The data is dated. They've not updated their vans. It's awful.
Yeah, data hygiene is probably like the most important thing if you're going to try to build something. And if you can't rely on the hygiene of your data, then I mean, like, whatever, anybody in marketing can tell you that.
I mean, look, I was canvassing and phone banking and ballot curing, the last 2 weeks of the election, and it was crazy. I mean, like we got sent to cure a ballot, and the house was full of like Marco Rubio signs, and like we would make calls and phone bank, and it was like all like wrong numbers, disconnected numbers, like just. And our data has sucked for so long, Kartik. I mean,
Tomas, you know this as well as anyone. That is the fundamental lifeblood of a political party. There's no need to have a state party at all if they're not maintaining good data. That's their first responsibility.
Yeah, everything Van, like for instance, my most recent experience with Van was, it feels like 20 years, 2 years ago, knocking on doors. I've talked about this on this show before, knocking on doors in Nevada, in Las Vegas, for Bernie. And that data was pristine. I knew everybody, like I never got led down a rabbit hole like in that canvassing. It was like, you could tell that there was some care and some thought and again, some money put behind the project. And it seems like here in Florida, like, I don't know, is there anything to this? Tomas, I've talked to you about this before, right? Like this idea that Florida, starting with Biden's run in 2020, became this sort of like almost like not a Trojan horse, but more of like a red herring, like where it was like, oh, well, these are expensive media markets. Let's let the GOP spend a bunch of money there. And let's just like wave the white flag and not give a shit. How much truth is there to that for people like me who feel like this party doesn't give a shit about the state anymore?
I wanted to talk about the Bernie campaign because the way that it was, and this is not uniform, but the Bernie campaign had a massive pool of volunteers that were phone banking voters. And by phone banking and canvassing voters, we were able to do what's called voter IDs, which we were able to identify a list of supporters that verbally communicated to us that, yes, I will vote for Bernie Sanders come that the time of the election. So then those voters were later put on a voter turnout list that was later contacted when we had to get out the vote. So the problem with the Florida Democrats and a lot of like the third party groups and other, I think, state parties is that they focus so much on algorithmic based models, and they've forgotten about the nitty gritty of just like actual like voter contact, like voter ID, persuasion, voter turnout. You know what I mean? That like, and that requires like a long-term organizer, year-round organizing. So I think this shift into algorithm-based voter models, while they can be helpful, has been detrimental overall.
They're probably helpful only in the sense that if you want to raise turnout and you're in a general election, you can use that algorithm to find new voters, right? But if you're not doing the basics, which starts with voter ID, which really should start 18 months out, ideally. I know when I said that to some people at the FDP, not this cycle, Tomas, but it would have been the past the cycle entering 2018. They thought that was insane. I said, no, you have to ID these people. Let's say before Labor Day of the out years. So for 2018, it would have been 2017. And you have to go through the process. And I know a lot of the advocacy groups do that, right? The C4s, et cetera, do that, and they keep better data. But let's since you mentioned Bernie, David, let's talk about this for a minute. There is this view that is very odd that I think has perpetuated itself in Miami-Dade County, that somehow the Bernie Sanders, to a lesser extent AOC, Elizabeth Warren, that they've ruined the brand of the Democratic Party. And maybe it's true in Miami-Dade. I don't know. I would defer to you guys on that. But I think that is a very bad attitude if you want to win votes in the rest of the state. Because what we've seen is Bernie go into places and fire people up. We saw, so the 4 places he visited in Wisconsin this weekend on behalf of Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers, you saw a swing towards the Democrats from the Biden number in 2020. Lacrosse, Fond du Lac, Eclair, and then, of course, Madison. Madison's always going to produce for Democrats, but you need to turn out. You need to excite that young base there. So Bernie has something, and so do Warren, AOC, all these people that they malign, that can help the party. I also heard Florida Democrats consistently saying President Biden, he doesn't like Florida. He's trying to deal with Maduro. He's making deals with the Cuban communists. You know what? They seem to have an expectation that the foreign policy of a Democratic administration should run through Miami-Dade County. And I just think that those are assets that we can use with, even in Miami-Dade County, with people who are not of that persuasion, to excite progressives.
I agree 100% on the foreign policy piece that you mentioned. Like the Democratic administration cannot make all its foreign policy decisions based on the whims of an electorate in Miami-Dade County. And again, placating.
They'll be doing Bay of Pigs every Saturday.
Yeah. And placating like the reactionaries in this county is also not going to ultimately be good long term for Democrats. You know what I mean? I mean, we can be nuanced and we should be culturally sensitive. But again, just going all in on the right wing messaging, not good either. Yeah. But on the Bernie piece, I don't even think we have to go as far as Bernie to make the illusion or whatever, because we have an example right here in Florida with Anna Skimani, somebody that, again, I talked about her in your Twitter space, somebody that has built an incredible constituent services and delivered in her district, somebody that has built a year-round organizing machine registering voters in Orange County, somebody that, flipped a red district, retained it while flipping Trump precincts, and then retained it again while boosting voter turnout in her district 10% higher than the rest of her county. You know what I mean? Someone who's popular with the base, somebody who's popular with Republicans in her district, somebody that employs a common sense economic populist messaging, somebody that is what Florida Democrats should be, I really do think that she is the North Star of what we should be doing. But the party has shunned her. They cut her out of flyers. They cut her out of events. They think she's too radical. She's too progressive.
Yeah, and she got rent stabilization. Her and Ida, and her and her sister, and the C4s there got rent stabilization on the ballot, as you know, in Orange County. That had the potential to be a statewide issue. It didn't just have to be an Orlando issue. I mean, it's a bigger issue in the Orlando area because of their demographics and their economy, hospitality industry, than it is maybe in South Florida or the Tampa Bay area. But it's a big issue all over the state.
Yeah, but statewide, we have become the least affordable state.
That, they decided they wouldn't talk about it at all. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just interjecting that we've become, in the aggregate, the least affordable state to live in. That could have easily been an issue. I try to think of the inflammation of nonsense culture issues that the right has successfully employed over the course of the last, I don't know, when did DeSantis get inaugurated into the office? Ever since then, they've been fucking great. Or actually, since we said this before, right, guys? Since he hired Christina Pushaw, they've been great at taking these issues and getting them universally adopted into the lexicon, universally adopted into the narratives, into the conversations. And it's goddamn it, why not just help somebody on the left try to do something similar with an issue that actually matters, and not scary trans people in bathrooms at schools and shit.
Which if I could piggyback off that, Anna Eskamani and Ron DeSantis don't have very much in common, but I would say one thing they do have in common is the people who support them know what their message is.
Yeah.
People who like Anna Eskamani can tell you why they like them. Why am I supposed to like Charlie Crist? Why am I supposed to like Nikki Fried? Why am I supposed to what is the message? Is it that Frank, is it just that you're embarrassed that she has a message and has things causes that she champions, whereas you are just trying to split the difference between not pissing off anti-communist Cubans and your donor base? That's the game you have to get out of bed and play every day.
So if we're going to talk about these reactionaries on the anti-communism, I think another great point is about Nikki Fried, because Nikki Fried, this falls at Manny Diaz's lap. Manny Diaz, as the Florida Democratic Party chair, should have been getting Nikki Fried out of that governor's race. She could have run for re-election as ag commissioner, or she could have just walked away. But instead, by allowing the primary to go forward, you had Nikki Fried funded by polluters, right? By sugar, by FPL, by utility companies, by Associated Industries of Florida to try and weaken Charlie Crist in the primary. Now we know those entities weren't necessarily interested in having a free governorship. They were concerned about the potential of a Crist governorship. So they made sure they weakened Crist in the primary. They made sure he spent down to zero and would never replenish that money. And they effectively funded her to make sure DeSantis got reelected. What did the Florida Democratic Party and the party chairman do during this period? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And while I don't think Charlie Crist was the ideal candidate, he's not a person I would have personally picked. I certainly do think he was more ideal than she was, and he was going to be the nominee, regardless. So, if you're a party chair at that point, you've got to stop the bad guys from coming and playing in your primary, which is what happened. I mean, let's not pretend like Nikki Fried's campaign was some sort of organic grassroots Democratic thing. It was funded by the same people who fund the Republican Party, the same people who have a vested interest in keeping the Republicans in power in this state, and so they knew if they could either take Crist down in the primary or weaken him, they were going to get their guy reelected, and that's what happened. And the Florida Democratic Party, sat by and let this happen.
Kartik, I was told that at a classroom that's taught by a mutual friend of ours at UM, Nikki Fried was invited and asked to basically comment on what she would have done differently when running for office, to win, because she lost by such a big margin. This was in front of 150 students, by the way. And she said, I would have raised money earlier. And which is just a stupid thing to say. But then, they asked her when, and she said, from the moment I got elected as agriculture commissioner. And the follow-up question was, but wouldn't that send the wrong message? I mean, you just got elected as agriculture commissioner. You're immediately going to declare your candidacy for governor and just start fundraising for it. And her answer is, I shit you not. She said, everybody knew that I was a stand-in as agriculture commissioner to run for governor.
This shows you the transactionalism and the narcissism.
Can you believe that? I mean, how insulting is that?
No, it's funny. It's reminiscent of a line. I don't know if any of you guys are fans of the show The Wire, but there was a situation where one of the main characters, Thomas Carcetti, who was then a city councilman, was running for mayor of the city of Baltimore and already planning his run for governorship. He had a famous line where they say 2 years, where his advisor is telling him 2 years as a mayor and then going to the governorship. That's kind of thin, isn't it? And he was like, well, it's a pretty thin world we're living in right now. So, I mean, like, I can kind of believe that, T. Like, the fact that, like, she was the only elected statewide Democrat. I if I were her, I would also assume that I'm being groomed to be governor or some sort of higher office, back in 2018. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem it seems like she was very much co-opted. I mean, it goes back to like something bigger that you said, Kartik, and I was again looking at your feed. You ended a thread where you were talking about sort of all the demographic changes and everything that we saw play out last night, and you can go check out Kartik's feed on Twitter, but he ends that with with just like a very plaintive, it's time for a change. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you think that change would look like to make Florida fucking at least, like, I don't know, competitive?
We got to focus on long-term goals here. We can't keep saying we're gonna patch things up for each cycle. So permanent campaign apparatus, something that is in the communities, something that's canvassing voters, that's doing voter outreach consistently. And if that means we get smoked in 2024, okay, let's build the infrastructure for 2026, 2028, and onward. One thing I do like that Manny Diaz did, although he did it half-assed, but was finally show some interest in municipal races and school board races. This is something I wanted the party to do when I worked for the FDP, which was now 20 years ago, 2002 and 2004 cycles, when I was on staff at the FDP. I would push in the building up in Tallahassee for us to get involved in municipal races. And only if it was like the mayor of, well, actually, Manny Diaz became mayor against Maurice Ferre in that period when I was at the FDP. And obviously, the Democratic Party was with Maurice Ferre at the time. It was a different party then. But only if it was a mayor's race in Jacksonville or Fort Lauderdale or Tampa, some big city like that, would we get involved. We wouldn't get involved in these smaller cities. We wouldn't get involved in county commission races. We wouldn't get involved in school board races. And the Republicans did. And in time, the Republicans built a bench along with their infrastructure, and they tied the loyalty of those elected officials to the party. Now, we're facing a situation where redistricting has made it very hard, and term limits, for us to have anchors in the state legislature that we can build around. Anna Eskamani is one. I wish we had 50 of her, but we have one of her. The closest thing to her we had was Carlos Guillermo Smith. He lost last night. Really shocking. That's a shock to the system for people like me and the three of you, right? That's just,
It's terrible.
That's one of the best people we had, and they look to
big
take
loss.
him out. So we have to build around local elected officials and do that long term.
Kartik, I actually wanted to go back to what you were saying about recruitment of candidates. So when in early 2021, myself and others were raising the alarm about the lack of candidates in the congressional races. And I personally went to the DCCC, who pointed fingers at the state party, saying that it was their job to recruit. The state party pointed fingers at the DCCC, saying that it was their job to recruit. Basically just a lot of, passing the ball. I was personally just talking to people, trying to get them to, move races, declare, people were waiting for the redistricting to finish, seeing how everything was playing out. Same thing happened with the cabinet positions. And there was no recruitment, there was no fostering, nothing. It was crazy. I just want to ask, because you've been around for so long, have you ever seen this level of just malfeasance and just lack of trying to lack of a pipeline and lack of candidate recruitment in the party?
Yeah, I actually wrote a document. I should find it. It was in 2002 about farm team, and it was and building a farm team, and it was kind of laughed at the time. And that's the job of the local DECs. Recruiting is the job of the D-Trip and the DGA. Even I was hoping for the governor's race that they come in and recruit candidates in Florida, which is absurd. But I don't think it's ever quite been as bad as it was this cycle, because what ended up happening is you'd have those conversations in the out year, like you were mentioning 2021, Tomas. It would have been, in 2009 for the 2010 cycle or whatever. And then eventually reality would set in, and the FDP would do its job, and the DCCC would do its job in the districts they're interested in this state. And the entities would then eventually coalesce and do some sort of coordinated campaign effort. That didn't happen this time, despite Chairman Diaz saying that they were launching the most unprecedented coordinated campaign effort, and Blue Shift Florida, and all of this performative stuff that never happened. And in fact, Gerald, you mentioned the GOP registration advantage. It actually doubled after the Democrats launched Blue Shift Florida. So that was supposed to negate the emerging GOP majority in the state. And all it did is it intensified the GOP's efforts, because they thought the Democrats were actually doing something, which they weren't. So they just worked twice as hard.
We tricked the Republicans into thinking we were going to do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys, I have a
damage.
former colleague that I worked with at the Herald, who I've been connected to on Twitter forever, Mark Caputo, who I'm sure you all know. and I had to stop following him because over the course of 2 years, not his fault, but every day I'm logging in, he's like, oh yeah, GOP narrows the gap. GOP narrows the gap in Florida. And I'm like, I don't want to hear this anymore. It used to be like a 500,000 registration advantage. And then every day I'm looking at Mark Kabuda's feed and he's like, oh, new GOP numbers out. They closed the gap by another 40, 30, 70,000 registrations. And it's like, God damn it. Am I the only person? Is anybody in a position of power or influence seeing this happen? And I guess the answer was no, they weren't.
So there have been people who've come back at me and said, "Well, voter registration, you're engaging less likely voters. To me personally, that I make too big a deal about the fact that the state party doesn't do this." But what I would say in response is that's voter engagement, that's voter outreach, that's canvassing, that's data. It's all of those things, and we're not doing it, and they are. It's as simple as that.
If it was a waste of time, they wouldn't be doing it.
Follow the model.
So my theory as to why the party doesn't do voter registration anymore is A, because they got lazy, but B, because I think the consultant cartel that runs the Florida Democratic Party can't make money off of voter registration because they would have to either contract a firm that does it, and if they do it themselves, it's a lot of overhead, it's a lot of work, and you don't get the same commission rates that you would get out of mail, TV, and even connected TV ads, which I think are really all important, by the way. I'm not saying we shouldn't do those, but I do think it's a lot of it is just the fact that a lot of these folks can't get the same commission payout out of doing, field work, especially voter reg. And voter reg is very hard and very expensive and not very profitable.
Yeah. That probably explains it. It's the consultant cartel, which is why we spend so much money on media in this state, because the consultant cartel is making money off of that.
Yeah, I mean,
the whole thing's a racket.
I mean, isn't it true too that like I think of loss leaders, like I think about when conservative groups or conservative ownerships buy media organizations, right? They know that they're not going to make money off of owning a newspaper or off of owning a television news channel. Like those are loss leaders, but they're there because on the back end, the narrative that they create, the consent that they manufacture using those media apparatuses can actually benefit them because, like, if they make it where it's like, oh no, sugar sludge is actually good to have in your environment, and red tide is actually a good thing to wash up on, then they are able to, there's no commensurate like back end of liberal or progressive politics where it's like, ooh, we'll make a profit, a tidy little profit if we take a loss on pay. And I think that to me seems like the big difference is the incentive structures. It's like the Democratic consultants are the end game, like making sure that they have like nice, tidy, profitable positions or agencies or consultancies. It's not about getting US Sugar or getting Disney a bunch of tax breaks. It's about just literally, I'm doing a job for this Democratic campaign or that Democratic campaign, and they're paying me well, and that's that. And it's like the GOP seems willing to put in the investment and take the loss up front because they know that they will recoup it in terms of like 8 years of Ron DeSantis controlling the state and maybe 8 years of him controlling the country down the road, right? Like, it seems like such a big problem to get your arms around when you look at it from a financial perspective, because the incentives are all fucked. All the incentives are fucked. It's like the incentives are there for them to not do what Tomas is talking about, for them to not, do like a merit-based approach or like a what's worked in the past. If the profit margins aren't there for door-to-door knocking, then it's like, well, then how are they going to make the money? It reminds me of the Chris Rock joke where he's like, if you don't let me work the cash register, how am I going to make any money? Like, I don't know, man. This seems. I wish I knew more about the way that the money actually flows, because when I see tweets like yours talking about Val Demings getting $72 million, I'm like, fucking where? Who was it that ran in South Carolina? He ran against Tim Scott. Yeah.
Jamie Harrison. Yeah.
Jamie Harrison, who did a great job. Shit, maybe that's what Val Demings should do next, is take over the National Party fundraising, because that's what Jamie Harrison did, right? He lost his way up to being in charge of all the money for the national party.
That seems to be a common thing in the Democratic Party. You fail upwards, which is how these consultants in Florida, by the way, the consultant cabal or cartel, as you call them, Tomas. It's great terminology, by the way. They've all failed their ways up. These are people who have not won races other than local races, won Democratic primaries, control some elected officials here and there. Right, there's one in Miami-Dade County specifically, one consultant in Miami-Dade County that's operated that way, who has influence all over the state, and lost us 4 Senate seats yesterday. But that's there's a cartel of these guys that effectively have failed, but they've glommed on to somebody who gets elected, who then pushes them on every other Democrat in the state.
But that can't be the model for, like you were saying, like municipal races. Like, it can't be that like someone running for Miami City Commission is going to go on like Joanne Reed's show to talk about how Trump has bad manners and please donate to my campaign. Like, that can't be the model for how we're going to attract funding and infrastructure to all these races.
Yeah, but that seems to be it's really scattergun, isn't it? I mean, like everybody is creating their own fiefdom and their own kind of personality cult, and there's no structure or discipline in this party. And then when you get someone who wants to create an organization, who's an elected official, and build something like Anna Eskamani, we keep going back to her today, but she's the example,
shining bright example,
example of the state. Yeah. They then say we don't want someone like her involved in party business. The person who's most on the ball and most qualified to do these things, they don't want involved because they're threatened, right? So I think there's a theory of Democratic consultants in the state would rather lose general elections as long as they win their primaries, control their primaries, and keep the party small and manageable. Keep the House caucus at 40, keep the Senate caucus at 14 or 15.
The margins are better.
Now we've fallen below both those numbers. Right, yeah. Just so we can control everything.
It's almost like they took exactly the wrong lessons from OFA, where like you saw this organization that was there basically to serve as the vehicle for Barack Obama personally, and then folded once they were no longer needed. It was like, damn, I wish that was me. I wish there was an organization that were for my benefit.
Yeah, it's the Planet Hollywood theory of change, which is like, we'll just hope Bruce Willis never gets old and it stays popular as long as he keeps cranking out Die Hard movies. The other side, though, I want to transition us a little bit. The other side isn't doing much better. I mean, they're doing much better in terms of their output, but I want to talk, and you've been really generous with your time, Kartik. We appreciate it. But like, maybe we can go out on like something a little bit more vapid and a little bit more fun to talk about, which is, what do you guys think Trump has on DeSantis? Did you guys see this yesterday where he was talking on Fox News and he said, I really hope. Oh, wait, Tomas does it way better, so we should let Tomas do the Trump impression. But he's like, I really hope that DeSantis doesn't run, because I know quite a bit about him. That I think only his wife would know more about him. I don't know. What do you guys think he knows? I'm really curious.
I mean, I'm 6 years waiting for him to spill beans all over Heidi Cruz. So like, this is just also a way.
Wait, but the Heidi Cruz thing came out. You guys read about that, right?
I didn't see any beans.
There was some beans. The Heidi Cruz thing was that I don't know what like shadowy organization is responsible for spawning the Ted Cruzes of the world and putting them where they need to be. But Ted Cruz was like a northeastern elite, whatever, Harvard guy. And they moved him to Texas. And Heidi Cruz didn't like that. And I guess was going through a tough time. And state troopers found her just shit-faced on the side of the road one day, complaining about her husband on like an underpass. And there's an array of which, like, by the way, who can't relate? Like, that's a hell of a thing. She was like, I didn't want to come to this fucking state. I didn't want to be here. I hate this place. And my fucking husband, man. Because don't forget, Heidi Cruz was like I think she was like a very successful lawyer in her own right.
She had Sachs, right?
Yeah. She had a successful career. And she got fucking Beverly Hillbillied or Green Acred out to Texas. And apparently she had a little bit too much wine. But I don't know, man. I don't know what kind of shit DeSantis has got lurking besides that, like those high school allegations about when he was a teacher or whatever. But
yeah, and that surprises me because it felt like DeSantis is one guy that's kind of clean as a whistle, really kind of a dorky Federalist Society. Well, like Ted Cruz, right? This Federalist Society trained droid that they dropped back. He is from Florida, so unlike Cruz, who they dropped in Texas, but they dropped him back
Right.
here for with
A little bit less of a
purpose.
carpetbagger, like not quite a carpetbagger. Yeah.
Yeah. Rick Scott was an outright carpetbagger, out and out carpetbagger. But yeah, I don't know what Trump could have on it. Is he trying to bully him? Is he trying to threaten him? In terms of DeSantis, right, his star has never been brighter than it is today. Especially, I think, if Kerry Lake loses. If Katie Hobbs hangs on there, that was the person who I thought maybe the MAGA people would run against DeSantis if Trump himself didn't run.
Right.
Would be Kerry Lake, and it's all lining up for him. But at some point, he'll have to get on a debate stage with Donald Trump, and he will get obliterated.
He's gonna get called. He's gonna call him something like Runnin' Ronnie or something like one time.
Wannabe Ron. He's been
Wannabe
copying
Ron.
me from day one, and now he's got to come face to face with the real thing, and it's really not going to be a good day for Wannabe Ron. Let me tell you.
Unfortunately, we had to hit rock bottom for it to happen. This should have happened, as all four of us know, 3 or 4 cycles ago.
2016 was supposed to be rock bottom.
No, this time for real. Care, this time for real. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. We have the same conversation after every election in Florida, although there's never been one this bad.
It's a very rocky bottom, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, it's how I know that it's mid-November in an even numbered year is that people are having this conversation.
The same conversation.
Set your fucking clock to it.
2 years prior.
Kartik, where can people find you and find the squeeze?
Yeah, so the squeeze is at thefloridasqueeze.com. And you can find us on Twitter at FLA Squeeze, and then me on Twitter at KKFLA737.
Great. Thanks for spending an hour just kind of griping with us and
wailing and gnashing of teeth.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wailing and gnashing of teeth, the airing of grievances.
That's all for this episode of Why Are We Like This? Be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts for more episodes or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us at wawlt.com. Follow us on Twitter at Walt Show and on TikTok at Walt Show. You can also email us at walt@allpointswest.net. Until next time, this was Why Are We Like This? Walt Mafia Rising.